Hi, hello Year 11 and welcome to the lesson on atmospheric impurities. So I've put down here from the specification what it is that you need to leave this lesson knowing about. So we need to know what the carbon footprint is and how we can reduce it. We also need to know how the following impurities are produced and their effect. So we need to know about carbon monoxide, soot, sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides. Carbon monoxide and soot you would have already done with Miss Slade in last week's lesson when doing about combustion. So just to get it started, we're going to start with the carbon footprint. So I want you to pause this video in a second and write down 5 things that you have either done or used today that have caused carbon dioxide or any other greenhouse gas such as methane to be produced. So I've got a couple of examples. Obviously, if those people that are coming in to school, you can do the second one if you took the bus. But if we can think of other things that will have increased the amount of carbon dioxide that you have produced. So pause the video and come up with 5 things now, please. Okay, so hopefully we've had a go at putting down at least 5 things. Pretty much anything where you are using electricity, so charging phones, using hair straighteners, anything like that will have increased the amount of carbon dioxide being put into the atmosphere. If you've put anything about food, so even the consumption of food increases the amount of carbon dioxide because it has to be transported to you, to the supermarket, etc. Any of those will be contributing to carbon dioxide. Okay, so the carbon footprint, what actually is it? So the carbon footprint is the total amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, and that's in red because a lot of people forget about that, emitted over the full life cycle of a product, service or event, or indeed a person. So when we're talking about the carbon footprint, it's not talking just about carbon dioxide, but things like methane, which is CH4, that also contains carbon. So that is the definition. So you can pause this video now and put down a definition for what the carbon footprint actually is. Okay, so just for a little bit of fun, I would like you in a minute to leave this lesson, so pause it and then leave this, open a new tab and go to footprint.wwf.org.uk, and there's some questions on there about your lifestyle and things that you do, so you'll be able to calculate your carbon footprint. So let's see how much of an effect you personally have on the environment. So leave this, go to the website and have a go at finding out your own carbon footprint. Think about the questions that are being asked and how that increases the amount of carbon into the atmosphere. Okay, so you might have been surprised by some of the questions, kind of questions that it's asking you. Hopefully you're able to link to how that produces carbon dioxide. You can obviously compare with each other, see who is the worst person for the environment. Right, so we're going to have a look at the carbon footprint and how we can reduce the amount of carbon being put into the atmosphere. So we've already given a definition for what the carbon footprint is, and if we want to reduce a carbon footprint, we need to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases such as methane that are being produced. Okay, so how do you think we can do this? So not just thinking about yourself, but thinking about the UK as a country, but also what we can do worldwide. What can we do to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide and methane? I'm going to give you 1 minute, so pause the video and give yourself 1 minute. Just jot down some ways in which humans can reduce their carbon footprint, and for each one, can you say whether it's reducing carbon dioxide or methane, and how each method reduces greenhouse gas emissions? I'm going to go through some really important ones in a minute, so we can see whether you match up to any of those. So pause the video and come up with some ways in which humans can reduce their carbon footprint. Okay, so add any that we talk about to your notes, or tick off ones that you have mentioned as we go. So one way in which we can reduce the amount of carbon footprint, our carbon footprint, is eating less beef. Now it's several different cattle and farmyard animals that produce methane, but cows are particularly bad because of the way their digestive system works. What gas is it that is produced that causes such a significant effect? Is it carbon dioxide or methane? Well done if you know the cows are a problem because they produce a lot of methane. So by reducing the amount of beef we eat, obviously it means there's less demand for cows, so there'll be less cows, which means there'll be less methane produced. Okay, another one is sending less waste to landfill by recycling more. So do we think that is reducing the amount of carbon dioxide, or is it going to be the amount of methane? Well done if you knew that it's also, well, it's going to be both of them, but one of the ones that people don't think about is methane. So by recycling more, we are reducing the amount of carbon dioxide. But what a lot of people don't realise is that by putting waste food and things like that into landfill, into the bin and not into the composter, actually produces large amounts of methane. So when things are broken down, they tend to be broken down by bacteria and they produce methane. Okay, next one, charging more tax on polluting vehicles. So if we were going to increase the amount of tax for cars that produce more pollution than others, what is that going to reduce, methane or carbon dioxide? Well done if you knew that it was carbon dioxide. So obviously the burning of petrol, the combustion of petrol in the engine produces carbon dioxide. So if you put more tax on cars that produce more of it, then people are less likely to buy that type of car, and to save money we'll go for less polluting cars. Okay, another thing we could do is use more biofuels which come from plants, and you can burn them as a fuel. So if we use more biofuels, are we reducing the amount of carbon dioxide or methane, do you think? Well done if you knew it is carbon dioxide. So even though we are burning the fuel and producing carbon dioxide, because we're getting it from plants, during their life they would have taken out from the atmosphere the same amount of carbon dioxide. So we say that they are carbon neutral. Okay, another thing we can do is capturing carbon dioxide produced in power stations and storing it in rocks. So is that going to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide or methane? Hopefully you realise from the second bit of that sentence there's going to be carbon dioxide. And carbon capture is a reasonably new technology, and what they do is they capture all the carbon dioxide and then they package it up and then they pump it down into the ground to trap it in rocks. Okay, so what we're going to look at now, we finished on the carbon footprint, so we know what a carbon footprint is, and we need to know how we can actually reduce carbon footprint, so we've looked at those examples. We're now going to be looking at some impurities that you can find in fuels. So last week we did about crude oil mostly containing hydrocarbons, but other fossil fuels could contain or do contain other impurities. Okay, and so does crude oil. It's not just carbon and hydrogen, and they contain other things that also have a problem on our environment, or cause problems to our environment. The ones we need to know about are carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, and carbon particulates, or soot. So we're going to go through each of those 5 different atmospheric pollutants. We're going to look at what causes them, and we're going to look at the effects of them on the environment. So taking up a whole page, I suggest doing it landscape. Make sure that your causes and effects columns are much bigger than your pollutant, because you're just putting the name of the pollutant. Can you pause the video and draw out that table, please? Okay, so we're going to go through each one of these, and as I say, we're going to look at what causes them, and then after that we're going to look at the effects. So fill in your table as we go. Right, we're going to start off with carbon dioxide and water vapour. Now, water vapour is produced alongside carbon dioxide from a process that you would have done with Miss Slade last week. We're not going to add water vapour to our table though, because water vapour will just end up in the water cycle, so it's not something that we have a big effect on. So where is it that carbon dioxide, or what is it that produces carbon dioxide and water vapour? Well, if you said it came from combustion, or complete combustion to be specific, of hydrocarbon fuels. So for instance, if we take methane and we react it with oxygen by burning it, it will create carbon dioxide and water. And there is the balanced symbol equation for that reaction. So first off, how is produced carbon dioxide from complete combustion of hydrocarbons? So pause the video as we go through if you need to add to add to your table. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is carbon monoxide. So again, this is what you would have done with Miss Slade last week. So what causes carbon monoxide to be produced? Well done if you said that it comes from incomplete combustion. So if there is not enough oxygen as it's reacting, as it's combusting, then instead of making carbon dioxide, you form carbon monoxide, and also carbon as well. So here is an equation of incomplete combustion of methane. So you've got methane reacting with oxygen to make carbon monoxide and water. And there is a balanced symbol equation for it. So in your how is it produced? It's produced by incomplete combustion of hydrocarbon fuels. And there is a comparison between complete and incomplete combustion. Right, next one, sulfur dioxide. Okay, now you will have covered this in Key Stage 3 as well as obviously when you did this at GCSE, but quite a few people forget how it's actually produced. Now it's really important to remember that most fuels, so petrol, diesel, coal as well, do contain mostly carbon and hydrogen, but they also might contain some sulfur. Now when sulfur reacts with oxygen, so as combustion's happening, it's also causing the sulfur to react with the oxygen. It creates sulfur dioxide. So here we go, sulfur, which is a solid reacting with oxygen, gas, to make sulfur dioxide. Okay, 2 oxygens, which is also a gas. So how is it produced? It's produced because many fuels contain sulfur, and when it combusts it makes sulfur dioxide. Right, next one, interesting one, this one, nitrous oxide. So you'll see that it has got the formula NO and then a little X, and that's because it can be NO or NO2. Okay, so we just call them nitrous oxides or nitrogen oxides. Now in a car engine, it gets incredibly hot, obviously, because you are burning petrol, and that actually causes some of the nitrogen in the air to react with the oxygen. So again, things reacting with oxygen. So you end up with nitrogen gas from the air, which is what most of the air that you're breathing is made of, reacting with oxygen in the car engine, very important, in the car engine, to make nitrous oxide, such as NO2. And we're going to look at why that's an issue later. The last one is solid particulates. Okay, so this is the soot and the carbon. And this mostly comes from diesel engines. And what happens is if the diesel doesn't burn completely, or incomplete combustion, which happens quite a lot, then tiny solid particles of carbon and unburnt fuels are produced. And these are called particulates. So diesel, even more than petrol, just because it is a larger hydrocarbon, so it more often combusts incompletely, produces soot or carbon particles, and we call those particulates. Okay, so that is how each of those atmospheric pollutants are produced. We're now going to have a look at the effect, and some of them, particularly the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, hopefully we already know the effects of them. So let's start with carbon dioxide. What are the effects of carbon dioxide? Hopefully you realise that it's a greenhouse gas, so it enhances the greenhouse effect. Okay, so it adds more greenhouse gas there, so it means that the temperature of the Earth increases, which is global warming. And global warming causes climate change. Okay, so they're three completely separate things. Greenhouse effect is different to global warming, which is different to climate change. But increasing the greenhouse effect causes global warming, which causes climate change. So that's the effect of carbon dioxide being pumped into the atmosphere. Okay, next one that you should know about is carbon monoxide. So what is the problem with carbon monoxide? Hopefully you know that it is a toxic gas. So you can't smell it, you can't see it, so it's very hard to detect. And it actually binds to the hemoglobin in your red blood cells, replacing the O2. So it gets in there more easily than oxygen. So that means there's less oxygen going around your body, which means less respiration, which can cause some serious health problems. Quite often, people who have got carbon monoxide surrounding them without realising it will just get really tired, go to sleep, and then might not wake up again. Okay, next one then, sulfur dioxide. So sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides, both of them, even though they are created differently, they both have the same effect. So one of the problems with sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides is that they can cause respiratory problems. So if you're breathing in sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides, it can have a big effect such as triggering asthma, that's causing asthma. Another big problem with it is that it causes acid rain. So that sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides go up into the clouds, dissolves in the water, and it creates acid. Okay, a weak acid, sulfuric acid and nitric acid, but when it builds up in lakes and on land, then it causes huge problems and kills lots of fish, damages buildings, destroys trees and things like that. So here is a picture showing how that actually happens. So you've got the sulfur dioxide, as I said, and nitrous oxides being released, goes into the clouds, dissolves, forms acid rain. Okay. Now it's not that you go outside and your face burns off from acid rain. It's very weak, but it accumulates in an environment. Right, last one then. So last one is the particulates. What is the problem with these? Well done if you have remember this word, but not only can it cause not only can it cause lung damage by clogging up all of the alveoli, but it also causes something called global dimming. Okay, and that's where those carbon particulates end up in the atmosphere, and it actually blocks, or it reflects back the sunlight into space, which means that less sunlight reaches the Earth, so it causes it to be a bit dimmer, hence global dimming. So those are the effects now of all of those atmospheric pollutants. So as I said from the beginning, we need to know about the carbon footprint, what the carbon footprint is. We need to know how we can reduce it, but we also need to know about these atmospheric pollutants, where they come from, and what their effect is. Okay, so hopefully that table has condensed it into a nice, easy, manageable amount of information, but those are the bits that we need to know from the specification. So thank you very much for joining me today. That is it from me, so well done. And tomorrow will be the exam questions that will be put on EduLink. Please make sure that they are completed before our lesson on Monday. Have a lovely day. Goodbye.